Hey everyone! This is a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button. It lets me know that you are enjoying my content. Also, feel free to drop your suggestions for future stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and let's dive right in. I never imagined I'd be in this position, sitting in a cramped little office, hoping for a job I was barely qualified for, just to make sure my son and I had something to eat this week. It had been months since I lost my job at the supermarket. I had a few small gigs here and there, but nothing consistent. Mike needed new shoes, and the fridge was looking more like a barren wasteland than anything remotely resembling a meal. I wasn't exactly proud of where I was in life, but I was doing the best I could. Mike had turned 6 last month. I was just 26 myself, a young mom with a child who, for all intents and purposes, was the only thing keeping me going. I had barely graduated high school when I found out I was pregnant, and Mike's father, well, he ran off the second he knew. Haven't heard from him since, and frankly, I didn't care anymore. Mike and I had learned to survive on our own, but it wasn't always easy. That's why I needed this job at the arcade. Desperation makes you do things, you know? This was my first interview in months, and for once, I had a good feeling about it. The job itself seemed simple enough. Restocking claw machines, cleaning, picking up trash, nothing I hadn't done before. But still, there was a tightness in my chest as I walked through the arcade's heavy glass doors, the sounds of beeping machines and the distant laughter of children echoing through the air. It was busy, more so than I expected. Bright lights flickered above, reflecting off the glass surfaces of rows and rows of arcade games, claw machines, and coin pushers. A man in his late 40s, wearing a crisp white button-down and dark slacks, greeted me at the entrance. His eyes were sharp, his posture straight, like he had the weight of the world resting on his shoulders. This was the owner, I presumed. "Dina, right?" he asked, extending his hand with a firm grip. "Yes, that's me." I shook his hand, my palm slightly sweaty. I tried to steady my breath. "Come on in, I'll show you around," he said, motioning toward the arcade floor. "I'm Mr. Hargrove. You're interested in the position, I assume?" "I am," I said, trying to sound confident, but I could feel my nerves bubbling up again. He nodded, clearly not one to waste time. We walked around the arcade, and he explained the ins and outs of the job. The place was immaculate, every game polished and shining. The claw machines all had bright, colorful toys in them. I could hear the sounds of people playing, the steady hum of machines, and the occasional joyful yell of a kid winning a prize. "You'll be responsible for restocking the claw machines, keeping the vending machines filled with snacks, and collecting coins from the pushers," Mr. Hargrove explained. "A lot of janitorial work too, of course. Cleaning glass, wiping down surfaces. It's not glamorous, but it keeps the place running." "Sounds simple enough," I said, trying to stay positive. Truth be told, I was just relieved to have the opportunity. He stopped near a row of claw machines and pointed to a laminated sheet hanging on the wall. "Here's a list of the rules," he said in a clipped tone. "Make sure you follow them, they keep everything running smoothly around here." I leaned in and read the list. "Always follow the cleaning schedule. Restock the vending machines every 2 hours. Do not climb on or in the machines, especially after 1 a.m. Do not allow anyone inside the arcade after hours. If the machines turn on, do not try to stop them. The toys in the claw machines will change spots. Ignore it. Do not attempt to move them back. If the lights turn off, do not open your eyes." My heart skipped a beat when I saw the last rule. It felt off. I tried to ignore the shiver crawling down my spine. "Some of these might seem a bit odd," Mr. Hargrove continued, his voice almost dismissive, "but they're for your safety and for the safety of the place. Employees have a tendency to get distracted. We don't want any accidents. Trust me, following the rules is key." I hesitated, glancing up at him. He was staring at me with those sharp eyes as if he could see right through me. "What do you mean by accidents?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He shrugged, not answering directly. "You'll understand once you start. It's nothing to worry about. The rules are here to keep things simple, just follow them and we won't have any problems." I wasn't sure if I believed him, but I had no choice. This was my chance, my only shot at keeping Mike fed and having a roof over our heads. "Okay," I said quietly, "I'll follow the rules." He nodded and handed me the sheet. "Good. Just remember them. All of them." There was a long pause, then I decided to ask something I had been meaning to bring up. I have a dog. His name's Kirby. He has separation anxiety and it's hard for me to leave him alone sometimes. Would it be all right if I brought him with me? The owner's eyes narrowed slightly. A dog? Here? I quickly added. It's not a big deal. He's a small dog, and he's really well behaved. It's just, I don't like leaving him alone. Mr. Hargrove sighed, clearly not thrilled. I'm not exactly a fan of pets in the workplace, but fine, bring him, I suppose. As long as he doesn't cause any issues. I thanked him, feeling a little relieved. Kirby was my lifeline, the only companion I had when things got tough. If I had to bring him to work with me, I would. As we finished the tour, Mr. Hargrove gave me a stern look. You can start tonight. Get to know the place, follow the rules, and you'll do fine. I nodded, trying not to show how nervous I was. I was already starting to second-guess myself, wondering if I'd made a mistake taking this job. But it was too late to back out now. My mind was a whirl of questions, but one thought stuck with me. Something felt off about this place. Maybe it was the way Mr. Hargrove avoided my questions, or the strange set of rules. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I wasn't being told. But in the end, I had no choice. I needed this job. I just hoped I hadn't made a mistake. The evening air was cool as I stepped into the arcade, Kirby trotting alongside me. The neon lights buzzed above, casting a colorful glow on the faded carpet. The arcade was mostly empty, just a few lingering customers in the back, kids laughing as they played the games. The machines beeped and hummed, but the place felt eerily quiet, like a fog hanging over it. The kind of quiet you don't usually get in a place filled with lights and noise. I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting with nerves. I had only been here once before, during the interview, and I hadn't realized just how much larger the place was in the dark. The walls were lined with endless rows of arcade cabinets, their screens flashing in vibrant colors, but now, at night, the space seemed to stretch on forever. It felt like there was a constant hum in the air, like the machines were breathing, waiting for something to happen. Just follow the rules, I whispered to myself, trying to push down the tight knot of anxiety in my chest. I was here to work, to make sure Mike had food on the table. That was all that mattered. I walked to the back of the arcade, where the cleaning supplies were stored, and started my rounds. First up was the glass on the claw machines. The usual task. I grabbed the cleaner, spraying the glass and wiping it down until it gleamed. But as I moved from machine to machine, I noticed something strange. Some of the toys in the claw machines had shifted. The stuffed bears and plush animals weren't where they'd been when I first saw them. A toy I swore was near the front was now at the back of the machine, and another one seemed to have swapped places entirely. I frowned, my thoughts drifting to the laminated sheet Mr. Hargrove had given me. The toys changed spots. Ignore it, it said. I shook my head, trying to push it out of my mind. The place had been open for years, so maybe it was just a quirk of the machines. I wasn't going to get worked up over it. Not tonight. Kirby, who had been happily sniffing around the arcade, suddenly stopped at the entrance to the back hallway. His ears perked up, and he let out a low growl, staring down the hallway with wide, wary eyes. Kirby? I called, kneeling down to his level. What's wrong, buddy? He refused to move, his growls growing more intense, but he wouldn't go forward. I scratched behind his ears, trying to calm him, but it wasn't working. Don't be silly, there's nothing there, I muttered, getting back to my task. But my heart wasn't in it. There was a strange feeling in the air, like the arcade was holding its breath. The hum of the machines was louder now, almost like a low growl in the background. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered once, then twice, and I paused. Great, I muttered, rolling my eyes. Faulty wiring, just what I need. I moved to the coin pusher machine next. The sound of coins clinking was oddly comforting, but even as I began adjusting the prizes, something was off. The toys inside the machine. They were all in different spots. I knew it for a fact. The little stuffed animals, the figurines, they weren't where they should have been. My heart skipped a beat. It was the rule. I remembered it clearly. The toys will change spots. Ignore it. Do not move them back. But curiosity got the best of me. I couldn't help it. I reached into the machine, adjusting the toys back into place, aligning them as they'd been earlier. As soon as my fingers brushed the last stuffed bear, the room suddenly went cold. A chill swept over me, a bone-deep cold that made my breath come out in a puff of mist. The lights above flickered violently. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell? I glanced around, but everything seemed normal. The light stopped flickering. The machines stopped humming so loudly, but the atmosphere in the room had changed. It was thicker now, like something was pressing in from all sides, suffocating the air. I had to force myself to focus. I grabbed the dusting rag and moved to the next row of machines, but the buzzing from the machines only grew louder. The steady beeping was joined by something else. It was almost as if the games were trying to communicate with each other, like a conversation I couldn't understand. Some of the machines buzzed with more intensity, almost as if they were malfunctioning. Others, the ones that had been quiet, suddenly hummed to life. I looked around. The arcade seemed to be alive in a way I hadn't noticed before, as if the games were awakening. My skin prickled with unease. Kirby growled again. This time, his hackles were raised, his body stiff, and he was looking at the row of games in front of me, staring intensely at the corner near the door. I could feel his fear. I could feel mine too, but I tried to ignore it. I finished wiping down the last machine and looked at the clock. It was almost time to close up. The arcade had grown quieter, but that sense of unease lingered. I was almost done, so I quickly grabbed the broom and started sweeping the corners. The coins had been collected, the prizes restocked, and the cleaning was almost finished. I was so close to getting out of here, I could almost taste the relief. Then, I heard it. A faint sound, at first like the soft click of a button being pressed. It came from one of the games in the farthest corner of the arcade. Click, another sound, closer this time. Click, click, click. Then the machines came to life. One by one. I looked over, and it was as though the arcade was waking up from a long slumber. The claw machines, the coin pushers, even the old static machines, all of them buzzing, humming, the lights flashing. The arcade was alive. The sound was deafening. I froze. A cold rush of air swept through the room again, and I felt my stomach lurch. The machines had turned on by themselves. But I remembered what Mr. Hargrove had said. Do not try to stop them. I stood there, motionless, unable to tear my eyes away from the whirring, blinking machines. It was like a slow-motion horror film, and I was stuck in the middle of it. Finally, I grabbed my purse and without a second thought, grabbed Kirby by his leash. I didn't care if I was leaving early. I had to get out of there. The arcade felt wrong. It had been wrong since the moment I stepped inside. I made my way to the front, the buzzing of the machines still echoing in my ears. Kirby was tugging at his leash, looking over his shoulder, growling softly. I didn't dare look back. As I stepped out of the arcade and into the cool night air, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something waiting for me to come back. I didn't want to come back. But deep down, I knew I would have to. The next night I did come back. I had no choice. I needed this job. It was nearly 1 a.m. when the last customers filtered out of the arcade, their laughter fading into the cold night air as the door clicked shut behind them. The arcade was silent again, the soft hum of machines the only sound filling the empty space. It felt oddly oppressive now, as if the machines were watching me, waiting for something. I'd been here longer than expected, but I didn't mind. It wasn't like I had anywhere else to be. Mike was at home with a frozen dinner I'd managed to scrape together earlier, and Kirby, my ever-reliable companion, was doing his best to keep me company. I tried to push the unease I felt aside. The arcade was strange, sure, but I had a job to do, and if I kept moving, maybe I'd stop feeling like something was lurking just out of sight. As the last of the flickering lights in the back hallway dimmed, I continued cleaning, finishing my rounds, and checking the machines one by one. The clock above the front desk struck 1 a.m., its chime echoing through the room, and that's when it started. At first, it was subtle, a flicker of light, a soft hum from one of the claw machines. Then, all at once, the arcade came alive. The lights blinked erratically, casting strange shadows across the walls. The claw machines began moving on their own, the arms twisting and jerking as if controlled by invisible hands. The coin pushers clanked, coins sliding across their surfaces, and the machines in the far corners of the arcade hummed louder, their screens flickering with static. My stomach dropped. No. This wasn't normal. It couldn't be. I turned around, half expecting someone to be there, but the place was empty. The arcade had come to life all on its own. The machines weren't just malfunctioning, they were moving like they had a mind of their own. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I moved slowly toward the back rooms, where the toys for the claw machines were stored. Kirby was tugging at his leash, whining and pulling me toward the front. He was never this anxious, never this scared. "Kirby, calm down," I whispered, but he wouldn't listen. He was on edge, his eyes darting around, growling softly as his fur stood on end. The machines continued to hum, their screens flashing with distorted colors, and that's when I heard it. Soft whispers coming from the back of the arcade. They were distant at first, but as the seconds passed, the sound grew louder, more insistent. It was like voices, muffled and indistinct, calling to me from the darkened corners of the room. I felt a cold sweat break out across my neck. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run out the door and never come back. But I couldn't. I had to stay. I had to finish the job. I kept my eyes trained on the machines, not daring to blink, as if they might disappear the moment I looked away. That's when I saw it. Again, the toys in the claw machines. They were in different spots than before. I wasn't imagining it. The stuffed bears and plush animals had moved, shifted into new positions like they were trying to get my attention. A few of them had been swapped out completely, replaced by new toys I hadn't seen earlier. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The toys changed spots. Ignore it. I wanted to scream, to throw the toys back into their original places, but the warning echoed in my mind. Do not move them back. But my curiosity clawed at me. The toys. Some of them seemed to be looking at me, watching me. I turned away quickly, trying to shake off the creeping dread that settled into my bones. I had to keep moving. Focus, Dina. Don't think about it. Don't think about any of it. But as I turned, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. The toys in one of the claw machines had shifted again. The same toys, the same ones that had moved earlier, were now arranged in the exact opposite positions. They were staring right at me. It was like they were waiting for something. I couldn't stop myself. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't resist. The compulsion was too strong. I reached out to adjust the toys, to make everything right again, to make it feel like I was in control of something, anything. As my fingers brushed the first stuffed bear, the arcade went dead silent. Click. The lights above flickered once more, and this time, they didn't stop. They buzzed out, and the entire room was swallowed by darkness. My heart slammed against my ribs, and I stood still, my hands trembling as I gripped the side of the claw machine for balance. My ears strained in the pitch-black silence, but all I could hear was the sound of gears grinding, faint clicks coming from deep within the machines, like the place itself was moving. Click, click, clank. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I could feel the air growing colder, sharper, like something was closing in around me. My breath was ragged, shallow, my pulse was in my throat. I reached for my phone, but I couldn't see a thing. The screen lit up for a moment, but even that didn't bring me comfort. The darkness felt alive. And then I heard it. A low, desperate growl. Kirby. I spun around, squinting into the dark, trying to find him, but all I could hear were the metallic noises of the machines, louder now, more frantic. His growl turned into a whimper, a pleading sound I had never heard from him before. He was scared, genuinely terrified. No, I could hear him moving in the dark, shifting, his leash rattling as he pulled away from me. I could barely make out his silhouette, and then nothing. Silence. "Kirby?" I whispered, my voice breaking. No answer. A cold shiver ran down my spine, and I moved towards where I had last seen him. But the second I took a step forward, the machines seemed to hum louder. The gears clicked again. A low, grinding sound that rattled my bones. Something in the air seemed to thrum, a pulse that matched the beating of my heart. My eyes were wide with panic, my hands shaking, as I tried to adjust to the darkness. I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe. And then I heard him. Kirby's whimpering was louder now, desperate. He was somewhere close, but I couldn't tell where. I could barely hear anything over the clattering, screeching hum of the machines. The arcade was alive, twisting and turning in the dark, and I could hear someone, moving. The sound was inhuman, like a shuffle, followed by a faint giggle, a whisper that chilled my bones. "Kirby?" I called again, my voice weak and trembling. Another low growl, and then nothing. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what I had walked into, but I was afraid. Afraid that I would never leave. Then, the worst thing happened. The lights flickered on. For just a moment, everything was illuminated. And in that brief flash of light, I saw Kirby. His eyes were wide, filled with fear. He was staring at something behind me. I didn't dare turn around. I couldn't. I was frozen. Frozen in the nightmare that had become this place. The lights flickered back on. I had expected the eerie stillness to be broken by the hum of the machines, but what I felt instead was something heavier. The arcade felt different, colder, darker. It wasn't just the absence of the shadows, it was the presence of something else, something I couldn't quite name. The machines hummed, their usual mechanical sounds now drowned out by an oppressive silence that weighed heavily on my chest. I glanced around quickly, my heart pounding, but the place looked the same as it always had. The blinking lights, the claw machines with their stuffed animals, the arcade cabinets lined up like sentinels. Nothing was out of place, not physically at least, but I could feel it. Something was wrong. I took a cautious step forward, but before I could even react, I saw it. A shadow darted across the floor. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but then I saw it again, darker, faster, slipping between the arcade machines like it was alive. My breath hitched in my throat. I wasn't imagining this. I spun around, eyes wide, scanning the arcade, but I couldn't find the source of the movement. That's when I noticed something. One of the arcade cabinets was shaking, its screen flickering as if something inside was trying to break out. The lights above buzzed in protest, dimming for a brief second before coming back to full strength. I took a step closer. But then, bark, Kirby, my usually calm and collected dog, erupted into frantic barking. His fur bristled as he strained against the leash, eyes wide and filled with terror. His barking wasn't just loud, it was furious. He was attacking something, or at least he was trying to. I instinctively moved to hold onto his leash, but he yanked hard, his growls turning into a frantic series of barks aimed at the shadows. He wouldn't listen, his instincts far stronger than mine right now. It was like he could see something I couldn't, something that was making him lose his mind. "Kirby, stop it," I hissed, trying to pull him back. But he refused to relent. His tail was stiff, and his body shook with the force of his anger. He wasn't scared. He was ready to fight. I looked back to where Kirby was pulling, toward the shadow that kept flickering and shifting in the corner. There was nothing there, nothing visible that I could make sense of. But I knew, deep down, that something was wrong. This wasn't just a power surge or a broken machine. It was something more. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the arcade, as if it were coming from all directions at once. "You shouldn't have ignored the rules, Dina." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My heart skipped a beat, my pulse racing in my ears. The voice was deep, cold, and unmistakably real. There was no denying it now. This wasn't just some technical malfunction, it was something else. I froze. The words hit me like a freight train. I thought back to the rules the owner had given me. The ones at the bottom of that laminated sheet, the ones I thought were ridiculous at first. "Do not open your eyes when the lights go off." I remembered the warning with a sickening clarity. I had broken the rules. I'd ignored them because I hadn't believed in any of it. But now I could feel the weight of that mistake. I stumbled backward, shaking. A deep chill crept up my spine, and I glanced around, my panic rising as the arcade seemed to close in on me. The walls felt like they were getting closer, suffocating me. The machines, the lights, they felt like they were alive, and they weren't friendly. The lights flickered again, and as they did, the machines seemed to hum with an unsettling life of their own. The buzzing, the whirring, it was all louder now. And then, the screens came to life. But it wasn't the usual game screens. No, these images were different, distorted, twisted. I saw faces, familiar faces, faces of employees, past workers who had come and gone before me, but these faces weren't smiling. They were terrified. Their eyes were wide, haunted, as if they were begging for something, for help, for mercy. The machines flickered again, and the faces morphed into something more grotesque. Their eyes bulged, their mouths twisted in silent screams. It was a nightmare. It was a warning. I stumbled back, barely catching myself against the counter. This arcade, was haunted. No, not haunted. Cursed. The faces on the screen were of people who had vanished, never to be seen again. People who had ignored the rules, people who hadn't followed the owner's instructions to the letter. People like me. People who thought they could handle it. The arcade's past employees were trapped in the machines, their souls bound to the place because they'd broken the rules. They were still here. And they would never leave. I choked on the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My vision blurred, and my legs felt like they might give out at any second. My body screamed for me to run, to get out, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave Kirby. And I couldn't leave the job unfinished. But more than that, I couldn't deny the truth anymore. This arcade wasn't just a place to have fun. It was a prison. A dark, twisted prison that had claimed countless victims, each one more desperate than the last, each one more terrified of what happened if they didn't follow the rules. I reached down, feeling Kirby's warm body pressing against my legs, his growls still vibrating in the air, but now softer, more fearful. It was like he knew we were in the middle of something we couldn't fight. The machines hummed louder as if they were drawing closer, the whispering voices growing more distinct in my ears. I had to get out. I had to break free. But the arcade was alive, and it wasn't going to let me go without a fight. The arcade had turned against us. The walls seemed to close in, and the machines, which I had once thought were just harmless games, now seemed to be alive. The claws on the claw machines snapped shut like jaws, their mechanical arms jerking wildly in the air, reaching for anything they could grab. The flashing lights disoriented me, making it impossible to tell where I was or which way I was facing. I could barely catch my breath as the air grew thick, suffocating, almost like the arcade itself was trying to consume me. Kirby was still by my side, his presence the only thing keeping me grounded in this nightmare. He growled furiously, every muscle in his body tense, as he tried to pull me away from one machine after another that lunged toward us. I couldn't think straight. The lights flickered again, casting long, unnatural shadows on the floor. Everything felt off. A claw machine lurched forward, breaking the glass with the claws, the mechanical arms reaching for me. I barely had time to react before Kirby, who had been pulling at the leash, lunged forward with a terrifying snarl. He threw himself in front of me, blocking my path just as one of the claws descended, its sharp metal fingers grazing his side. "Kirby!" I cried out, my heart sinking as he yelped in pain. He hit the ground with a whimper, but his eyes never lost their intensity. With a low growl, he pushed himself up, ignoring the blood beginning to trickle from the scratch. He stood between me and the machine, ready to fight, ready to defend me from whatever this place had become. I didn't know what to do. It was clear now that this arcade wasn't just haunted. It was alive. The lights, the machines, the whispers that seemed to follow me everywhere. All of it. It was part of the arcade. Part of a curse, a prison, a twisted game. And the rules were the only thing keeping us alive. I didn't know how much longer we could survive like this. Then, through the flashing lights and clanging machines, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A door. A small unmarked door at the far end of the arcade, hidden in the shadows behind a row of games. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. This was the only chance I had to escape. "Kirby, come on." I tugged on the leash, but he stayed by my side, stubbornly protective, despite his injury. I ran toward the door, pulling Kirby along with me. The arcade seemed to react to my movements, the lights flickering violently, and the machines groaning like they were alive and angry. It was almost like the whole place was fighting me, trying to keep me from finding the door. But I made it, just as a claw machine's arm swiped dangerously close to my shoulder. I pushed the door open, heart racing. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing off the walls. Inside, it was a small room filled with old employee uniforms and name tags, yellowed with age. There were no windows, the air smelled musty and stale. I stepped inside, my breath caught in my throat. As I looked around, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. These weren't just old uniforms, they were theirs. The name tags, each with a name scrawled on it, had a chilling familiarity. Names of past employees, each one vanished. Gone. Never heard from again. There were no records, no trace, except for their uniforms left behind like a grave marker. And then, it hit me. They hadn't left, they hadn't quit. They had disappeared, vanished, just like the rules had warned me. The arcade had consumed them, just as it was trying to consume me. The rules weren't just there for safety, they were the key to survival. Follow them, and you lived. Break them, and you became part of the arcade's twisted collection. A cold chill washed over me. I looked down at Kirby, who was panting softly by my side, his ears pressed flat against his head. He was exhausted. I was exhausted. The arcade had its hold on us. It was becoming too strong, and we were running out of time. I took a deep breath, thinking back to the rules I had broken, to the ones I had ignored. The one I had ignored most of all, the final rule. If the lights turn off, do not open your eyes. It was the one rule I had been terrified of, the one rule I hadn't dared break. But now, with the arcade closing in, I had to make a choice. A terrible choice. I had to see what was behind the shadows. I had to see what it wanted. I turned to the door, the familiar hum of the machines ringing in my ears as they crowded closer. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow. This was it. I had to break the rule. Just as I stepped toward the door, the lights flickered. Then they went out. Pure darkness. I froze. I couldn't see anything, nothing at all. The sounds of the arcade, the machines, the whispers, all swirled in my ears like a storm. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. The machines hummed in a frenzy around me. I could feel their gears moving, their sharp claws snapping. It felt like the arcade was closing in, like it was going to swallow me whole. I heard Kirby's growls, faint but protective. He was close, keeping me safe even in the dark. Then everything went silent. The air was still. And in that silence, I heard it, a single bark, and then, nothing. Just silence. The arcade was no longer a place of games, it was a place of death. And I realized then, with crushing clarity, that I had just made the ultimate mistake. I hadn't followed the final rule, and now it was too late to turn back. I passed out, and it seemed like hours had passed when I finally woke up. The coldness of the darkness had passed. The machines were no longer making their dreadful noises, no longer humming with that oppressive energy that had filled the space. There was a stillness now, an eerie calm that blanketed the arcade. The lights flickered once, then stayed on. I opened my eyes. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. The arcade, once a place of fun and games, now felt like a tomb. It was too quiet, too empty. The sounds of the games, of children laughing, of coins clinking, were gone. All that remained was the faint buzz of static. And then I saw it. The claw machine. It was the one I had seen Kirby protecting me from. But now, it wasn't just any toy in that machine. It was a stuffed dog. A stuffed dog that looked exactly like Kirby. I staggered toward it, my heart pounding painfully in my chest. The machine wasn't moving, no mechanical arms trying to grab anything. The dog sat there, staring at me with unblinking eyes, a perfect replica of my own dog. My best friend. The only family I had left. Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached forward, my fingers trembling as I touched the glass. Kirby had sacrificed himself. He had jumped in front of the claw machine to protect me, taking the hit so I could escape, so I could survive. And now he was here, trapped in a claw machine like one of the toys he had always hated. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to scream, to let my anger and grief consume me. He had saved me, but at what cost? I had lost him. My heart felt like it had been torn in two. I picked up the stuffed dog and held it to my chest, clutching it like I could somehow bring Kirby back. But I knew, deep down, I couldn't. The arcade had taken him. The machines had stolen him from me in exchange for my life, and now the price was paid. As I stood there holding the lifeless toy in my arms, I realized the truth. This place, this cursed arcade, had been trapping people for years. The games, the machines, the rules. It wasn't just a game, it was a prison, and the only way to escape was to follow its rules. But I had broken them. And now, the arcade had taken what it wanted. My dog, my only companion. The arcade was silent now, no longer pursuing us, no longer alive with the same malevolent energy. I turned toward the exit, my feet dragging with the weight of what had happened. I couldn't stay here. I had to leave. But as I reached the door, something stopped me. The arcade door closed behind me with a soft click, sealing me out. And as I stepped into the cold night air, I heard it. The hum. The faintest, most distant sound of the machines, still alive and waiting. It was as if the arcade was still watching me, even as I walked away. As if it knew I could never truly escape. as if it was just biding its time, waiting for the next person to come along and make the same mistake I had. I looked down at the stuffed dog in my arms, my heart aching as I thought of Kirby. He had protected me, but I would never be able to protect him. I couldn't forget him. I couldn't forget any of it. I had left the arcade behind, but I could still feel its grip on me, deep inside. I would never be free of it, not truly. And I wondered, as I walked away, if I would ever be able to forget the horrors I had witnessed, the sacrifices, the broken rules, the ghosts of the past. As I turned a corner, the arcade's humming grew quieter, fading into the distance. But its rules, its haunting presence, would stay with me forever. And somewhere, deep in the darkness, I knew the arcade was waiting. Waiting for the next person to break the rules, waiting for the next soul to be claimed. And I couldn't help but wonder, would it be me again someday?